There is one argument that deals a fatal blow to every single branch of Orthodoxy. This is something that Orthodox apologists don't have a good answer to. It's something that flat out proves that there's a contradiction in the internal logic of Eastern Orthodoxy. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what this argument is. I'm going to cite all of the sources and do all the heavy lifting for you so you can take this argument, give it to your Orthodox brothers and sisters, and hopefully bring them back into communion with Rome. But before I get into any of that, I just want to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for Orthodox apologists because they have to be incredibly intelligent. As a Catholic apologist, my job is very easy. I simply have to read the fathers and then report what they said. As an Eastern Orthodox apologist, what you have to do is prove either that the fathers said what they didn't mean or meant what they didn't say. And as we go through this, that's going to become abundantly clear that the Catholic position is the simple, basic reading of all of history. So in this video, I'm going to limit myself to only using the church councils from the early centuries. I'm not going to say how Athanasius appealed to Rome, how St. John Chrysostom appealed to Rome, how all of the Eastern Fathers, whenever they had any conflict, always appealed to Rome. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to go through the literally hundreds of quotes of church fathers who say that the Roman See is supreme. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into Matthew 16, where Jesus obviously institutes Peter as the Pope. For the sake of this video, I'm going to limit myself to the church councils, which Catholics and Orthodox both accept. We're going to zoom in here on two church councils, and I think you're going to be struck by the clarity of these councils in defining the position and the authority of Rome. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The first council we're going to look at is the Council of Ephesus. This is where we get the famous definition that Mary is the mother of God. And this comes from the year 431. So we're going to take a look here, not at the doctrinal decisions of the council, but how the council treats the Bishop of Rome. This comes from the Acts of the Council of Ephesus. Philip is the representative of the Pope at this council. Philip the presbyter and legate of the Apostolic See said, "There is no doubt, and in fact it has been known in all ages, that the holy and most blessed Peter, prince and head of the apostles, pillar of the faith, the foundation of the Catholic Church, received the keys of the kingdom from our Lord Jesus Christ, the Savior and Redeemer of the human race, and that to him was given the power of loosing and binding sins, whoever down even to today and forever both lives and judges in his successors, the holy and most blessed Pope Celestine, according to due order, is his successor and holds his place, and us he sent to supply his place in this holy synod, which the most humane and Christian emperors have commanded to assemble, bearing in mind and continually watching over the Catholic faith, for they both have kept and are now keeping intact the apostolic doctrine handed down to them from their most pious and humane grandfathers and fathers of holy memory down to the present time." Okay, any 10-year-old could read that, and then you ask them, who's in charge? Who's the foundation of the church? And they're going to say, Peter. And then you ask them, who lives and reigns in Peter's stead? Who holds Peter's office? Who judges in Peter's place? And they're going to say, Pope Celestine. The plain-faced reading of this text is that Pope Celestine reigns in Peter's name. That Pope Celestine has the authority of Peter, and that Peter was the rock, the foundation, and the head of the Catholic faith. The East and the West both accept this council. Why can't we just accept what the fathers said at face value? And perhaps you think I'm taking it out of context. Maybe you think that there's another explanation, and maybe there is. But as we keep going through and we keep seeing the deference that every bishop in the East and in the West shows to the Pope of Rome, you're not going to be able to hold that position anymore. This argument that I'm about to show you is going to devastate every single Orthodox objection. It's going to be so blatantly obvious that the Eastern Church submitted to the Pope of Rome in everything. The Eastern Church recognized the supreme authority of the Pope of Rome for hundreds of years, for the first hundreds of years of Christianity. This is not a new invention. This is not something that the West came up with later. This is just the way the church operated from the time of the apostles. And we can see this is commonly accepted in the East and in the West because Saint Cyril, the Bishop of Alexandria, after Philip says these things and calls the Pope the head of the church, the successor of Peter, the foundation of the faith, after Philip says those things, Saint Cyril of Alexandria says this. He says, the professions which have been made by the legates and Philip of the Roman Church stand manifest to the Holy Synod, for they have made their profession in the place of the Apostolic See and of the whole Synod of the God-beloved and most holy bishops of the West. Wherefore let those things which were defined by most holy Pope Celestine, the God-beloved bishop, be carried into effect, and the vote cast against Nestorius the heretic by the Holy Synod, which met in the metropolis of Ephesus, be agreed to universally. For this purpose, let there be added to the already prepared acts the proceedings of yesterday and today, and let them be shown to their holiness, so that, by their subscription, according to custom, their canonical agreement with all of us may be manifest. So listen, Philip says the Pope is the head of the apostles. Philip says that Peter is the head of the apostles, and that Pope Celestine reigns in his place. He says that. And then Cyril of Alexandria, rather than saying, actually, in the East, we have a different tradition where all the bishops are equal, he doesn't say that. Cyril of Alexandria does not say that. He says it is manifest. What you have said is manifest. It's obvious. That's what Cyril of Alexandria says. The leading bishop in the East says it is manifest. It's obvious. It's abundantly clear that the Pope reigns in the place of Peter, who was the head of the apostles. And in case you think I'm cherry picking and just pulling out proof text, go and read the document yourself. I had to select certain passages in order for this video not to get ridiculously long. There are many, many times where the Pope is given deference, where the Pope of Rome is given the final say. Read the document yourself. Don't take my word for it. But we're going to take a look at just one more that emphasizes the fact that the Pope is the head of the church. In the Acts of the Council of Ephesus, again, Philip the presbyter said, "We offer our thanks to the holy and venerable synod, that when the writings of our holy and blessed Pope had been read to you, the holy members, by our holy voices, you joined yourselves to the holy head, also by your holy acclamations. For your blessedness is not ignorant, that the head of the whole faith, the head of the apostles, is blessed Peter the apostle." What is going on here? Once again, the councils in the early church recognize Peter is the head of the apostles. And who reigns in Peter's office? Who has Peter's prerogatives? Who? The Pope of the present day. Listen, guys, this isn't rocket science, right? There's probably many Eastern Orthodox apologists out there who are smarter than me, who've read more of the fathers than me, who have all the languages memorized, who know what this is in the original Greek and in the Latin. That's fine. But the thing is, the plain reading of the text speaks for itself. St. Justin Martyr said that when you're defending the truth, it's like defending a lion. You don't have to fight for it. You just let it out of its cage. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm letting the early church speak for herself. What did the early church think? The early church, once again, thought that Peter was the head of the apostles and that the Pope reigned in Peter's place. This is going to become even more clear as we look now at our second council, the Council of Chalcedon. The Council of Chalcedon is another ecumenical council, and Pope Leo the Great was the Pope at this time. And he settles the dispute with his famous Tome of Leo. Once again, we're not going to focus on what the council defines, but on the council's attitude towards the papacy. This is what they say. From the Acts of the Council of Chalcedon in the year 451. Wherefore, the most holy and blessed Leo, Archbishop of the great and elder Rome, through us and through this present most holy synod together with the thrice blessed and all glorious Peter, the apostle, who is the rock and foundation of the Catholic Church and the foundation of the Orthodox faith, has stripped him of the episcopate and has alienated from him all hierarch worthiness. Therefore, let this most holy and great synod sentence the before mentioned Dioscorus to the canonical penalties. So what do we see? Again, the Pope is reigning in Peter's stead. Dioscorus is a heretic, and he, just a couple years before Chalcedon, tried to hold something called the ROBBER'S COUNCIL. He was trying to push heretical ideas, and he was pushing very hard, and he had basically won. And this council was about to define doctrine that was heretical and that would have violated even papal infallibility. But one man speaks one word, and the council is nullified. The man who spoke was the papal legate. As the council was going on, the papal legate said one word. He said contradictor, which means I object. After that, the council was nullified. It was done. It was not considered ecumenical. And the papal legate had to run for his life because the heretics were running the council and would have put him to death. So what do we see? The early church doesn't accept the ROBBER'S COUNCIL. Why? Because one man spoke one word. The papal legate said, I object. And he spoke with the authority of the Pope, and it nullified all of the proceedings. It was done. It was over. It was cooked. I object. One word, contradictor. In fact, in the early church, the way that you would tell if a council was ecumenical or not was if it had received the papal seal of approval. The reason that the First Council of Constantinople is not considered ecumenical at first is because it was done without the Pope's approval. It was originally not intended to be an ecumenical council. It was just meant to handle the regional difficulties that were going on in the Eastern Church. And they even write a letter to the Bishop of Rome saying, we apologize that you're not here and that we can't get to you. We're dealing with heretics who are killing our people left and right, so we can't really travel. We have to get together and figure this out. So for that reason, at first, the First Council of Constantinople is not recognized as ecumenical. And it's not until Gregory the Great recognizes it as such that it becomes ecumenical. The Pope is what determines what council is ecumenical and what council is not. And we're going to see that even mentioned in this Council of Chalcedon. Look, check it out. This is what they say. For he, Dioscorus, undertook to give sentence against one over whom he had no jurisdiction. And he dared to hold a synod without the authority of the Apostolic See, a thing which had never taken place nor can take place. The Apostolic See is another way of saying Rome. One of the reasons Dioscorus is condemned is because he tries to hold an ecumenical council without the Pope, a thing that cannot and will never be done. That's what the council says. It's a thing that has never been done and can never be done. In order for an ecumenical council to be ecumenical, you have to have the Apostolic See. You have to have Rome's approval. This is one of the reasons that since the schism, the East has had 0 ecumenical councils. 0. Generally, Orthodox accept about the first 7 councils, although there's some division among Orthodox about that. But generally, they accept the first 7. They've not had a council in over 1,000 years. The church has needed councils. The church has undergone grave heresies since the year 1000. Think of Protestantism alone. Where is the Orthodox response to that? There is none. And it's because the Orthodox are no longer united. If you take away Peter, you take away the foundation and the building crumbles. St. Cyprian says that the chair of Peter is the source of sacerdotal unity. If you take away Peter, the visible sign of unity, then the rest of the church crumbles. The objection the Orthodox have against the church is the same objection that the Protestants had against the church. They both reject the authority of the Pope. Look, the Pope can and has and will again abuse his authority. It's just a fact of the matter. But if you only agree with the Pope when the Pope agrees with you, when you only obey the Pope when the Pope tells you to do what you want to do anyway, that's no obedience. That's not what Christ was talking about in the Gospels. We have to learn to be obedient to the right authority and all things that are not sinful. St. Paul in Romans chapter 13 makes it very clear. All authority comes from God. St. Peter says if you suffer unjust persecution, you'll be rewarded in heaven. But the civil magistrates, your church leaders, they have rightful authority over you. The Pope has a lawful authority over every single man, woman, and child on the planet. And an abuse of authority does not mean that the authority goes away. We are called to obey the Pope in all things, not sin. Just to hit on a few more points here from the Council of Chalcedon, they call Pope Leo the Archbishop of all the churches. After they read the tome of Leo, they say, Peter has spoken thus through Leo. And after they decide what the council has said, they say, those who contradict are Nestorians. Those who contradict this council, let them go to Rome. So what do we see the Orthodox doing? The Orthodox appealed to antiquity to defend their claims. But the problem is, the early church fathers submitted to Rome. The early church councils submitted to Rome. If there is a single doctrine about the church that you can prove from a simple historical survey, it's the primacy of the Roman bishop. Athanasius goes to Rome whenever he needs to have his trial heard. He's the bishop of Alexandria, the second most important diocese in the ancient church. And at one point, he's even exiled because the Pope, Liberius, was he was literally tortured and forced to sign an edict against Athanasius. He was a friend of Athanasius. He supported Athanasius publicly over and over again. But when he's tortured and he sees his friends tortured in front of him and they're forcing him to sign this document, he eventually signs and exiles Athanasius, an Eastern bishop in the second most important see in the ancient world, is exiled by the Pope. And what does St. Athanasius do? Does St. Athanasius say, this is unheard of? The Pope has no authority to tell me to leave my bishopric? Absolutely not. I am the Bishop of Alexandria. I am the bishop of the most important Eastern see. Is that what Athanasius does? No. Athanasius sees that the Pope has told him to vacate his see, and Athanasius simply leaves. Why does Athanasius do that? Because Athanasius is a saint. And he recognizes that the Bishop of Rome has authority over him. And an abuse of authority does not eliminate that authority. So he obeys the Pope. And in the end, he's vindicated. So if you are a Catholic and you want to defend the faith against Orthodox, you need to know where to find those texts. The Acts of the Council of Ephesus and the Acts of the Council of Chalcedon. They very, very strongly, in no hidden terms, proclaim that Peter is the head of the apostles, and he lives and reigns through the Pope in Rome. Listen, it's not a coincidence that all of the early heresies arise in the East. It's because the Pope of Rome resides in the West. And I speculate that God, whenever he was writing history, wanted the early heresies to be in the East. Why? Because God wanted to instill in the minds and in the hearts of the Eastern bishops a deference to Rome. And that's exactly what happens. One more thing before you go. I have been putting a ton of work into a debate that I'm about to do with another Christian YouTuber who's an Orthodox guy who is very popular. And I'm super excited for it. But it's been taking a lot of my time. And because of the resources I'm having to put towards that, I'm hoping to get some members on Buy Me a Coffee to support me monthly for as little as $10 a month. I really have some of the best subscribers in the world, and you guys have been incredibly generous already so far. But I'm hoping to get just a few more so that I can support my work and spend more time on this debate so I can do the best job possible to honor Jesus Christ. So if you're interested in giving me a one-time gift or becoming a monthly member, please check out the link in the description, and God bless.